Welcome back, everyone. Get your hot coffee or tea and get under a blanket. I'm Chris, and welcome to Dark Horror Diaries podcast. Your house is supposed to be safe. Your neighborhood is supposed to be friendly. Tonight, we expose the lies. These are 3 true stories where home wasn't a sanctuary. It was a cage. We're talking stalker neighbors, unsettling late-night intrusions, and the paralyzing fear of being utterly alone when something finds you. Stop scrolling. Pay attention. The nightmare starts now. When I left London for my sabbatical, I wasn't looking for drama. Just a quiet place to finish my manuscript. I'm a history professor, recently divorced, trying to salvage the one thing I've got left, my book. It's about the occult and religious purges of early America. So when I found a quaint colonial home in Salem, Massachusetts, on AirBNB, creaking wood floors, antique furnishings, and the kind of silence that makes you think, well, it felt too poetic to pass up. The host, a woman named Judith, greeted me with an odd calm. She looked late 60s, skin like pale parchment, voice wrapped in molasses. "Only one rule," she said, pressing a rusty brass key into my palm. "Don't enter the candle room. It's locked for a reason." I blinked, expecting a smirk or punchline, but she turned and walked to her car, her heels crunching the gravel like bones. The candle room was at the end of the hallway upstairs. The door was black and carved with strange, symmetrical symbols, like runes or folk art. A tarnished brass plate above the handle read, "Candle room not for guests." I took a picture of it, thinking I might use it in the book. But later that night, I deleted the photo. I couldn't explain why. It started with the lights. At 2:17 a.m., the hallway outside flickered like a heartbeat. When I opened my door, the glow beneath the candle room pulsed orange. Then came the chanting. Soft, rhythmic, like breathing, but not quite human. I pressed my ear to the door, my breath catching. Words in no language I knew. Whispers like dry leaves. When I turned back toward my room, I swear I heard the door click. Not open, just unlock. The next morning, Judith messaged me. "Hope your first night was peaceful. Let me know if you need anything." I nearly replied about the lights and the chanting, but decided not to. I needed the isolation. The paranoia would pass. But then I saw muddy footprints outside my bedroom. Small, bare, like a child's. I told myself it had to be a draft, a trick of the light, maybe even a rat. But by the 3rd night, sleep became a memory. I stayed up with coffee and a knife from the kitchen drawer. The chanting grew louder. Closer. My door creaked open at 3:03 a.m., and I swear I saw a flicker of movement. A hand pulling back from the threshold. The next morning, Judith sent another message. This time, there was no greeting. Just a single line. "Some doors are better left closed." I tried to be rational. I'm a historian, not a ghost hunter. I chalked the messages, the chanting, the weird lights up to jet lag and overexposure to the kind of material I write about. Still, Judith's message kept echoing in my head. Some doors are better left closed. It was too cryptic, too precise, like a warning layered beneath a threat. On the 4th night, I noticed something new. The closet in my room, which had always stayed shut, was open just a crack. Inside hung a child's raincoat, yellowed and stiff, like it had been forgotten for decades. I hadn't noticed it before. It smelled of wax. Beneath it, a pair of children's shoes rested neatly. Too neatly, on a faded crocheted mat. I didn't touch anything. I just closed the closet and dragged a chair in front of it. I finally called Judith. She didn't pick up. Straight to voicemail, the message cold and rehearsed. "You've reached Judith. I'm not available. Please, no messages about the candle room." That line, made my chest tighten. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I began inspecting the house. The bookshelves were filled with tomes on Salem's history, sure. But more than half were handwritten journals. Leather-bound, pages curling, titles like "Soul Containment Practices of 1702 Inches" and "Preservation Through Flame." In one of them, I found a name repeated over and over, Elias Moore. Each time, it was followed by a date and the word "claimed." The dates spanned 3 centuries. I scanned further until I found a list that ended with a gap. Then the year 2023. My year, my throat tightened. No name beside it. Just a smudge. A placeholder. That night, I barricaded the hallway with a bookshelf. My plan was simple. Stay up, record anything unusual, and confront Judith the next morning. Around 2:45 a.m. the bookshelf rattled once, then again. I held my phone with trembling fingers, recording. The chanting returned. Louder, more urgent, like it was happening inside the walls. When I replayed the recording, my voice cracked. The chanting didn't appear. Just silence, except for a whisper at the end, claimed. I barely slept. When the sun rose, I opened the front door to find a small burlap sack resting on the steps. Inside was a candle, short, blood-red, half-melted. Wrapped around its base was a photo of a boy with eyes scratched out, and beneath it, a note. The house chooses who stays. I spent the next afternoon pacing the living room, trying to plan my exit. My return flight wasn't for another week, but I didn't care. Something was wrong with the house. With Judith. With me. I booked a rental car, packed a single duffel, and tried to ignore the faint hum that seemed to rise from the floorboards every time I stood near the stairs. But when I went to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. The deadbolt turned freely, but the door stayed sealed. As if the house had exhaled and held its breath, locking me inside. Don't panic, I muttered, trying the windows. Nailed shut. Every one of them. Upstairs and down. Even the cellar door groaned but didn't open. I called the AirBNB emergency line, but it disconnected before a human picked up. I was trapped. Not metaphorically. Physically. I sat on the floor, heart pounding, staring at the staircase. The candle room door was ajar. I crept up, each step a creak in an ancient language. The door to the candle room had been opened inward, just a few inches. Just enough to tempt. The air smelled of melted wax and something sharp like scorched metal. I pushed the door wider. Inside, the room was circular, every inch of the wall covered in childlike drawings. Stick figures surrounding a central flame, eyes inked in black. In the middle stood an altar made of bone and wood, lined with candles. Dozens of them. All unlit. All blood red. But it wasn't empty. A figure sat hunched in the far corner. Small, still, wearing the yellow raincoat from my closet. I froze. "Hello," I said, my voice shivering. No answer. I stepped closer, heart smashing against my ribs. I reached out and touched the coat. It fell inward. Empty. No body. Just the coat, filled with salt. Then I noticed the floor. A circle had been drawn in chalk around the altar. Symbols I recognized from the journals. Binding runes. I flipped through my phone, comparing pictures I'd taken of the books. A ritual. A soul-binding ritual meant to trap the essence of a person in a house. Feeding it, keeping it alive. Preserve the soul, fuel the fire, one journal had said. I backed out, closing the door behind me, and that's when I heard footsteps. Above me. I hadn't noticed a trapdoor in the candle room, but something had moved up there. Something pacing. A low scratching began behind the walls as I stumbled back to my room. And then, under my door, a new note slid silently into view. Written in a looping hand. Once the candle chooses, the soul cannot leave. Beneath it, a matchbox and another photo. This time, it was me, eyes scratched out. I didn't remember lighting the candle. I only remembered holding the match, trembling, staring at the photograph of myself with the gouged-out eyes. The flame sprang to life with a hiss that sounded almost pleased. The red wax melted unnaturally fast, pooling into a perfect circle at its base. Then the floor groaned, long and low, as if the house had taken a breath. I realized too late. I had triggered something. Some part of the ritual had begun. The chanting returned immediately, no longer distant. It was inside the room now. I whipped around, heart pounding, but I was alone. Or seemed to be. The air shimmered near the corners like heat rising off pavement. From the hallway, the candle room door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. Then footsteps. Bare, slow, deliberate. Approached my bedroom door. I grabbed the knife from the nightstand. "Stay back," I yelled, but no one answered. The footsteps stopped. A voice came through the door. Not Judith, a child's voice. "They're waiting," it whispered. "They're almost here." I stared at the door, not daring to blink. "Who?" I asked, my throat dry. No reply, just a soft humming sound like a lullaby without melody. I pressed my back to the far wall and gripped the knife harder. Then I remembered the books. The journals. There had to be something in there. A reversal. A way out. I tore through the handwritten volumes until I found a passage marked with symbols I'd seen on the floor. Circle of salt. Flame of origin, speak the name of the host. My eyes caught fire on those last words. The host, Judith. She wasn't just the owner. She was the one binding these souls to the house. She was the one feeding it. The final step in the ritual was sacrifice. By fire, by name. I had one shot. I scattered salt from the kitchen into a wide ring in the candle room. My hand shook as I placed the red candle back on the altar. I waited until dark. That's when the trapdoor above creaked open. Judith dropped down slowly, feet bare, eyes distant. She didn't seem surprised to see me. You lit the candle, she said. You've been chosen. I told you to leave it closed. You trap people here, I said. Children, tourists, you feed them to this thing. Her face cracked into a smile. The house is hungry. It remembers. It chooses. I only serve. She stepped into the circle. Finish it if you dare. She didn't flinch. She welcomed it. I lit the candle again and shouted her name. The salt flared like magnesium. Judith screamed. Only it wasn't human. The voice splintered into dozens, hundreds of howls. The drawings on the walls blackened and peeled away. Judith's body contorted, caught in the flame, her skin cracking like old parchment. She reached out. But the circle held. The fire spread fast. The flames twisted like they were alive, curling toward Judith's shrieking form, but never breaching the salt. She dropped to her knees, eyes wide, pupils like pinholes. It won't let me go, she rasped. You can't break the chain. The house needs blood. Her voice became something less than human. A brittle, cracking whisper that seemed to bleed into the walls themselves. But I didn't step back. I held the flame high, chanting the words from the journal. The room shook, wood groaning in agony, and above us the trapdoor slammed shut on its own. Judith thrashed within the circle, her body unraveling like fabric set ablaze. She didn't burn. She dissolved, piece by piece, as if the fire peeled back layers of her that weren't meant to exist. Around her, the children's drawings flared with light before crumbling to ash. I saw the faces of those she'd trapped. Brief flickers in the candlelight, wide-eyed, watching. The journal had said, the host must be named, the circle must be sealed, and when the fire accepts her, the house will exhale. I didn't know what exhale meant, but the house began to move. The walls pulsed. The floor cracked beneath me, revealing slivers of black beneath the boards. Shadows climbed the corners like smoke. Something deeper than Judith was being disturbed. Something old, patient, and furious. Suddenly, the flames surged upward. Judith's final scream came not from her throat, but from the entire room, a chorus of voices all crying out at once. I threw myself back, the salt burning so hot it singed the floor around it. The candle melted down to nothing, and in its place, just ash. No sign of Judith. No blood, just silence. The floorboards beneath the altar split open like rotted teeth, revealing a narrow tunnel choked in smoke and lined with symbols carved deep into the earth. I didn't want to look, but something compelled me, a compulsion like gravity. I stepped to the edge. Inside were bones, hundreds, small, child-sized, arranged like spokes in a wheel, their tiny skulls all facing upward, and in the center, a book. I climbed down, ignoring the sting in my throat. The book pulsed with heat, bound in waxy leather, its cover marked with the same runes from the journal. I took it, closed it tight, and climbed out. As I stepped back into the candle room, the trapdoor above creaked open again. Only this time, no one descended. Instead, a whisper floated down. One must remain. I ran. Out of the candle room, down the stairs. This time, the front door flung open at my touch. The house had exhaled. The morning air hit me like a baptism. Cold, clean, silent. I sprinted to the road barefoot, duffel clutched tight, Judith's book burning against my side. I didn't look back, not even when the house groaned behind me like a wounded animal. I just ran until I reached the tree line and collapsed. The house stood in the distance, calm now, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I'd seen the bones. I'd heard the whispers. I didn't go to the police. What would I say? That my AirBNB host was part of a centuries-old soul cult. That a blood candle picked me for sacrifice. Instead, I left Salem the next day, booking a flight on standby and never looking back. The house was still listed. Still 5 stars. A new host profile had replaced Judith's. Same property, same warnings. Do not enter the candle room. The reviews all glowed. Quaint, Charming. Spiritual, one even said. Felt like something watched me all night. Loved it. The Book of Shadows stayed with me. I tried to destroy it. Burn it, drown it. Nothing worked. It dried itself in hours, reformed from ash. I started having dreams. The same ones every night. Children standing at the foot of my bed, silent, always watching. Sometimes they whisper Judith's name. Sometimes mine. I haven't lit another candle since. Not once. I researched the names in the book. Elias Moore, the others. All missing persons. Some as far back as the 1700s. All had stayed in that house. All had vanished. The last name now, mine. Scribbled in faint ink next to the year. But the smudge where it used to be has disappeared. It's been filled in. The worst part isn't the memories or the nightmares. It's the fact that the book keeps adding names. New ones. Every week. Dozens of people are still going to that house, being claimed, one by one. And I don't know how to stop it. The ritual is too old, too deep, and Judith. She wasn't the first. She was just the latest host. Tonight, I heard the hum again. In my apartment. Same pitch, same rhythm. I followed it to my hallway, where a candle waited on the floor, red, half melted, a photograph pinned beneath it. This time, it wasn't me. It was someone else. A stranger, their eyes scratched out. And beneath it, "You must deliver the flame." I blew it out. But I know it won't matter. The house doesn't just choose, it spreads. Has anyone stayed at 237 Stillwater RD? I clean AirBNBs for a living. I've been doing it for about 2 years now and have recently started my own cleaning company. I used to work for a larger management company, but had some difficulties with my boss and the way the business was run. So I quit and started managing a couple on my own. It doesn't pay too much, but I get to work on my own time and I'm my own boss. A large majority of the AirBNBs I clean are mom and pop operations, and since they don't have the time to do it themselves, they pay me to tidy up between guests. Most of the properties are left relatively clean, but every once in a while we get shitty clients that will trash the place for a party or God knows what else. The worst I've had to do is scrub dried puke or throw away the occasional used condom, but it's worth it to be my own boss. I do most of my business through Craigslist, advertising my cleaning services to anyone in the area who may need help with their place. About a month ago, someone replied to my listing with nothing but the address of their property, the amount I could expect to be paid, and the first date it required cleaning. 237 Stillwater Road, $125, June 24th, 12 p.m. Although this may seem strange to someone new or unfamiliar with the business, it's fairly common for messages from the hosts to be this simple. It was part of the reason I enjoyed the job. I've never been a people person, so I enjoyed the simplicity of the limited interaction I had with people. I responded saying I could take the job and didn't give it a second thought. The rental looked run down from the outside, in desperate need of a paint job to replace the peeling white paint on the exterior. The rotting and curled shingles only exacerbated the weary look of the house. Nestled on the top of a steep hill, it overlooked the vast and deep Stillwater Lake, which coincidentally harbored a few of the other houses I maintained. It was one story with an unfinished basement indicated by the concrete foundation and the windows peeking just over the grass. However, the inside was a different story. The moment I stepped in, something felt off. Not wrong exactly, just too clean. Walking through the house, I found 2 fully furnished bedrooms, a kitchen, an attached garage converted into a game room, and a couple of doors I assumed led to closets. It was as if it had not been touched in weeks. I absently noted this as strange, as the listing said that the previous occupant had left no less than 2 hours ago. Walking through the house, not a single pillow or sheet in the bedrooms looked to be disturbed. No dishes sat in the sink waiting to be scrubbed. No crumbs or dirt dotted the carpet or stained wood floor. It's not uncommon for occupants to clean up the rental in order to avoid a large cleaning fee, but I'd never seen a rental this sterile. However, I pride myself on being thorough and decided to replace the sheets as well as vacuum the floors just to be safe. Upon getting to the kitchen, I noticed a door in the corner I did not previously register. Stuck to the door was another detail I must have passed over on the initial walkthrough. A pinned note displayed a simple request written in neat handwriting. Replace salt and water softener. Through the door was a dark stairway leading into the basement. A lot of these old rentals had me do this as part of the routine. It was a menial task, but was inconvenient enough for me to often forget about, as they were usually out of the way, in basements or garages or other places that I rarely had any reason to go to. Forgetting was generally not a big deal though, as these salt-dependent water softeners can often go weeks without being replenished. Since it was the first time I had cleaned this rental, and the owner had explicitly asked for it, I decided to not take the chance that it could wait. About halfway down the stairs, I realized that the light from the open kitchen door was failing. I turned around to realize that the door was shutting and raced to the top of the steps. My initial panic was met with the realization that the door was simply on old hinges and naturally closes on its own. A cold shiver ran up my spine as I understood that both the descent and ascent would have to be made in complete darkness. I'd never been afraid of the dark, basements, or anything like that. But there was something unsettling about being alone in an unfamiliar house. One that had hosted countless strangers, owned by someone I'd only exchanged a few brief messages with. It left me more uneasy than I could ever remember feeling. Still, I told myself this was something I had to do. Making it down to the hanging chain attached to the bulb was no big deal. A swift walk down the stairs, and I could easily make it to the chain before the door fully closed. I'd bet that even a relaxed walk could allow me to pull it in time, but that was not something I had the nerve to test. The basement of the rental was the stereotypical Midwestern unfinished basement. Concrete floors and exposed wooden beams, it reminded me of my childhood home. I was greeted by the pungent mildew smell, the damp and suffocating odor considerably stronger than the average basement. The singular light bulb swayed on its chain, casting strange, long shadows around the room. A negligible amount of light was filtered through the grimy windows haphazardly covered with cardboard, illuminating dust motes with their weak beams. There was old junk lining the walls of most of the basement on shelves or in boxes. Undoubtedly the source of the musty smell. The water softener was tucked into one of the four corners, nestled between the washer and dryer. The salt in the water softener was completely empty. Typically, it takes about a month for a 4-person family to go through the salt if it is fully filled. Either the salt hadn't been replaced in about a month, if it was full to begin with, or this rental somehow uses an almost impossible amount of water. Puzzled, but eager to get out of the basement, I poured one of the salt bags stacked against the side of the water softener into the maw of the machine. As I turned to leave, I noticed a peculiarity under the stairs. A circular dark spot resembling water damage was situated between the wooden supports holding up the flight. As I approached it curiously, I realized it was not simply a black spot, but a damp and yawning opening, stretching an indiscernible distance into the foundation of the house. The jagged rim bore evidence of man-made tools, likely a primitive and homemade well due to the antiquity of the house. Whatever cavernous depths the well reached into was hidden from the light of the singular bulb. I grabbed a loose pebble from the crude concrete floor and dropped it into the mouth. I waited for the response and received none. I contemplated leaving the basement light on and calling it a day, but it was my first time cleaning this rental, and I was determined to leave no trace of my presence. Additionally, there was the possibility that the occupants would not find the light and turn it off, and the thought of having to replace the burnt-out bulb in the complete darkness made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath and tugged the chain down, plunging myself into complete darkness. As I did so, the sound of the pebble echoed back, winding tortuously and intoxicating from the black throat of the well. I still have the scar from running up the stairs. I told myself I wouldn't sprint, but as soon as I yanked the cord of the bulb, a fear I haven't felt since childhood swept over me. My mind conjured forms in the darkness behind me, fangs and nails scraping the air furiously inches away from my calves as I launched myself up the stairs, their shape changing every new step. I yelped as my foot caught on one of the steps, and as my knee connected with the stairs, radiating a sharp pain out from my kneecap. I scrambled to get myself up, wincing at the sharp pain, and clambered up the remaining steps. I half expected the door to be locked when I made it to the small landing at the crest of the stairs, and let out a relieved sigh as I collapsed through the door into the kitchen. The shapes in my mind evaporated at the presence of the dying summer light pouring in through the kitchen windows. I felt my face blush with the shame of the last 10 seconds, but another part of me insisted that my fear was justified. Attempting to shake this feeling off, I did my final walkthrough of the house. By now, the adrenaline had worn off and my leg throbbed with the memory of my tumble. After I was sure everything was up to my standards, I bolted the front door, limped out to my car, and drove off. I have been cleaning this rental for just over a month now. Every time is the same. The house is immaculate when I arrive. There is a new note on the door to the basement, written in the same handwriting, but written on a different sticky note or with slight variations in the print. The water softener is always empty, and I always dump salt to the fill line. For each bag of salt I go through, a new bag replaces the one I have used up the next time I show up. I have now ceased cleaning the rest of the rental. I exclusively replace the salt and ponder over the well. The well has become a source of morbid fascination for me. Sometimes I stare into the fissure for what seems like hours, only to return from the trance and realize barely a minute has passed. I continue to drop pebbles, waiting in almost erotic anticipation for the distant echo. A single thing varies, though. I am more terrified of the basement each time I go. The shapes are closer. Sometimes I think I feel them brush my shirt or pant leg when I run up the stairs in the dark. Maybe I do. I've started to bring a flashlight on my daily trip into the basement, but this does little to reduce the thoughts in the back of my mind. I bring it regardless, as it's better than nothing. This notion of something else being in the room with me has started to follow me throughout the house. At first I felt it only when I was in the basement. Then I felt it in the kitchen. Now I feel it when I enter the house. I have cleaned it every day since the first day. Every night, the owner will contact me with the address of the rental, the amount I can expect to be paid, tomorrow's date, and the time they expect me to clean it. I have never seen anyone staying there, nor any evidence of inhabitants within the house. But the house is always clean. I have never dusted, but no dust accumulates on the untouched furniture or shelves. No indentations on the couch where someone might have recently sat. The dishes are always in the same spot, none left out in the sink for me to clean. I have never even seen a car sitting in the driveway or a light on while simply passing by. There is something off about the reviews for this rental online. It is almost as if they are AI generated. They follow a very formulaic structure, with many of them sharing many phrases like "feels like home," or "we look forward to staying again." All of them are 5 stars, and not a single one says anything critical about the property. The incessant mystery has festered in me like a wound, bringing me to yesterday's events. I stood under the light bulb, its dangling chain in my right hand, my flashlight heavy in my left. I inhaled deeply, pulled my right hand down, and plunged the room into utter darkness. My clammy hands fumbled to find the button, illuminating the well upon its location. I cautiously approached the pit, angling my flashlight down its gullet. Though apparently graded for military use, the beam from the flashlight was swallowed eagerly by the pit's ebony gloom. I waited. In the lack of visual or auditory input, the brain tends to make its own stimulus. So when I saw a faint reflection at the edge of the flashlight's reach, I thought that it was simply this phenomenon in action. The reflection continued to expand, shimmering as it grew in intensity, so much so that I was almost convinced that the flashlight's reach had somehow been extended to whatever depths the water table lay at. The reflections grew in their intensity, and with a terrifying beauty I can't begin to describe, I realized that the light cast back wasn't that of water, it was that of innumerable eyes. My blood ran cold, and I watched in detached horror as my flashlight tumbled into the inky darkness. Consciousness returned, after how long I am still not sure. I ran panicked through the darkness towards where I assumed the staircase was. I fumbled around and located the cool banister, using it to propel myself up the stairs. On the 5th step, the decaying wood gave way, robbing me of my momentum. I caught myself with the assistance of the railing, but upon attempting to pull myself up, the 2 ends of the broken board snared my right leg, tearing at the skin on my ankle. I tried to pull myself out of the stairs, which only served to push the splintered step further into my leg. Gritting my teeth and rotating my body, I felt for the cracked wood. My finger brushed a jagged edge pain shooting up my arm as a splinter slid under my fingernail. A carrion, rotting smell suffocated me. I gagged. With my left leg and my remaining strength, I kicked aside of the board with panicked fervor. The first kick only served to drive the splintered wood further into my tender flesh. I was certain that this is how it would end. The second did the same, but I could feel the rotted wood giving way. Adrenaline surged, dulling the pain into something distant and unreal. On the third, the board snapped. I was free. I clumsily pulled myself along on my stomach. Reaching the crest, I fumbled for the doorknob and threw the door open. If God is merciful, then it will someday relieve me of the horrid sight that the dying light illuminated. Scores of them lined the staircase, their imp-like bodies twisting and convulsing in an attempt to escape the soft glow of the sun. Their skin spread thin and pale over their bony bodies, revealing twisted and purple varicose veins over their ape-like bodies. The horde clawed over each other, tearing flesh from their leprous bodies and spilling their ichor in a deafening silence. They oozed and slithered down the stairwell, indeterminable in their numbers, but an amalgamation of claws, fangs, and atrophied wings. In places, skin bubbled and burst, emitting a foul and indescribable stench. As the last of the monstrosities vanished into their antediluvian crypt, they left behind only the shattered stair, and the trail of blood marking my escape. Although I struggle to recall what followed, they say a good Samaritan found me. Babbling, incoherent, I was taken to a nearby hospital where I've remained ever since. Despite my insistence, the doctors claim there's no rental listing for 237 Stillwater Road. Just a long abandoned house. But I know the truth. I know what I saw. Periodically, I still hear it. The sweet, distant echo rising from the well, calling me back. I know I will return. And when I do, I will know just how deep the well goes. I run a YouTube channel called Urban Unearth, a corner of the internet where the creepy, the abandoned, and the paranormal converge. Most of it's clickbait. Empty motels with flickering lights and staged creaks. But when a fan tipped me off about a supposedly haunted AirBNB outside Providence with a 2-star rating and a string of abrupt cancellations, I knew I had something different. The listing description was sparse, just historic charm, quiet retreat, and one peculiar note at the end. No refunds for early departure. My kind of place. I arrived just before sunset, the sky bleeding orange behind the trees. The house stood alone, white paint peeled to the bone, its front porch sagging like a tired grin. I pulled my camera out of the glove compartment, already scripting my intro. "You guys ever book a place just because it felt wrong?" I said into the lens. Well, buckle up. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lilacs and something metallic. The decor was frozen in another decade. Floral wallpaper, brass fixtures, and a rotary phone mounted on the kitchen wall like a relic. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just silence and the low ticking of a clock somewhere deeper inside. My room upstairs was spotless, which made the single fresh daisy in a water glass by the bed all the more eerie. "All right," I muttered, switching off the camera. "Show me what you got." That night was unremarkable. No footsteps, no shadows, not even a whisper. I woke up groggy but relieved. Still, something was off. The house felt new again. The daisy in the glass looked freshly picked, the same way it had last night. I could hear birds chirping outside, same rhythm, same pitch. Then the knock came. It was the delivery guy, same guy from yesterday, holding the same brown bag. "Theo, right?" he said with the same crooked grin. "Dinner from Lou's Diner?" I hadn't ordered anything. My stomach dropped. "No man, you brought this yesterday." He blinked. "It's still Tuesday, right?" I ran upstairs, flung open the bedroom door. The daisy was there, bright as ever. The clock read 7:03 a.m., same as the day before. My phone buzzed. Notification from YouTube. New subscriber, Shadow Off June. The same name as yesterday, and the day before that. I didn't know how, but I was back at the beginning. I tested it. Repeated the steps down to the second. Brushed my teeth, drank the hotel coffee pod, walked out to meet the delivery guy. Same line, same crooked smile, same hot bag of Lou's meatloaf and mash. I even dropped the same fork. The loop was perfect, airtight. Whatever was happening wasn't coincidence. I filmed the second repeat. Then a third. I stitched the clips side by side. Identical audio patterns, timestamps, even the same birds flapping past the same window. My comments section lit up. Fake. Nice editing. Try harder. That was the worst part. No one believed me. By the fifth loop, I snapped. "You hear me?" I shouted to the empty hallway. "What do you want?" No answer. Just the ticking clock and that stupid flower. I didn't sleep that night, and when I woke again, it was still Tuesday. I tried everything. Drove to town, called the cops, even smashed the phone and tossed it into the woods. Nothing stuck. The day always restarted with me back in bed at 7:03, the daisy intact, the house humming with silence. By the 8th loop, I started noticing changes. Small glitches in the repetition. One morning, the rotary phone was off the hook. Another time, the daisy was wilted. I left a note to myself scrawled in toothpaste on the mirror. "You've done this," it said when I woke up. And I had. Again and again. Whatever force trapped me here wasn't just looping time. It was watching. I ventured into the attic on the 10th loop. It hadn't been on the rental listing, and I hadn't bothered before. The door stuck like it hadn't been opened in years. Dust choked the air, and the light bulb dangled without a chain. I used my phone flashlight. Old furniture, boxes, and in the far corner. An antique vanity, cracked mirror, and a dusty armchair. As I approached, a chill grazed my neck, and I saw it. A faint reflection behind me. A woman. She stood in the mirror, translucent but unmistakable. Early 20s, wet hair clinging to her shoulders, a slit wrist dripping into the carpet. I turned. Nothing, just air. But the mirror still held her gaze. Her eyes didn't plead. They judged. Accused. Back in my room, I reviewed footage from the attic, but she wasn't on camera. Only my voice, trembling. "Why are you doing this?" I asked the dark. There was no reply. Just a whisper I couldn't place, spoken in a hush that wasn't mine. He watched, and did nothing. The whisper haunted me long after, clinging like smoke to my thoughts. He watched, and did nothing. Who was he? Was it someone in the house? Or someone from her past? I knew I had to dig deeper. The next day, I said day, but it was the same loop. I combed through the house again, searching for anything out of place. I found a loose floorboard beneath the window seat in the living room. It creaked when lifted, revealing a dusty leather-bound journal. I flipped through it quickly. The handwriting was neat but desperate, pages yellowed and brittle. It belonged to June. June Crawford. She'd lived here 10 years ago, a poet with fragile hope. Her last entries spoke of loneliness, an abusive boyfriend, and a terrible night when she planned to leave for good. Then the writing stops. Smudged ink and a single sentence. "If he finds this, know I tried." My skin prickled. This wasn't just a haunted rental story anymore. It was real. I read aloud one of her poems, a sorrowful piece about being trapped in her own mind, hoping to break free but sinking deeper into darkness. I felt the weight of her pain, a chill deeper than the autumn air pressing against my skin. I decided then I wouldn't be the next guest lost forever in her nightmare. That night, I set up cameras and recorded myself reading the journal, trying to piece together June's last hours. Suddenly, the room chilled. The daisy wilted completely. The clock stopped. Then, a soft knock. My breath caught. The front door creaked open. I grabbed my flashlight, heart pounding, and walked out into the dark hallway. A silhouette stood at the end, blurred and wavering, but unmistakably her. "June," I whispered. The figure nodded slowly, then vanished like smoke in the wind. The house seemed to exhale. I was starting to understand. The loop was her pain, her unresolved story, replaying endlessly. I promised aloud, "I'll help you. I'll find the truth." The house stayed silent, but for the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt watched, yes, but also waiting for someone to care. With June's journal as my guide, I started piecing together her story. She was a woman trapped by fear, haunted by a man named Mark. Her boyfriend, according to the entries. The last entry hinted at a confrontation, a night where Mark came for her. I felt the weight of her final hours pressing on me like a storm. If I was going to break this loop, I needed to recreate those hours exactly. It felt like walking a tightrope over a dark abyss, but I couldn't back down. That evening, I staged the living room as she described, moving furniture to match her sketches. I found a crumpled photograph behind the fireplace. June smiling, arm wrapped around a man whose face was scratched out. I whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. Only silence. I filmed every moment, hoping the cameras would capture what my eyes could not. Then, as midnight approached, the house shifted. The air thickened and shadows pooled in corners. I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, descending the stairs. "Mark," I called out, voice steady despite my pounding heart. The hallway filled with a cold presence. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. My flashlight flickered. In the flickers, I caught a figure, tall, dark, threatening. The name from the journal wasn't just a ghost story. Mark was here. I forced myself to speak. "June deserves peace. You don't have to stay." The shadow hesitated, then morphed into a twisted blur of anger and pain. The house groaned under the weight of their hatred. I felt June's sadness, raw and endless, and the violence that shattered her last night. My skin prickled as if the walls themselves remembered the screams. I ran to the attic, clutching June's journal like a lifeline. "Tell me what I'm missing," I begged. The pages flipped open on their own to a hidden note. It revealed Mark's secret. He'd hidden evidence of his abuse and threatened June with silence forever. The house's curse was tied to his denial, his refusal to face justice. Gathering my courage, I spoke aloud. "Mark, you can't hide anymore. This ends tonight." The clock chimed midnight. The daisy glowed faintly, then burst into petals. The loop wavered, stretched. The house sighed. I braced myself for what came next. The moment the daisy fell apart, the room spun like I was caught in a whirlpool. Time splintered, fractured, and then it stopped. For the first time, the clock didn't restart at 7:03 a.m. Instead, a new scene unfolded like I'd flipped a page in a book that had been sealed shut. I was no longer just a spectator. I was inside June's final night. I found myself in the kitchen, the air thick with tension. The old rotary phone rang sharply, a jarring sound that made my skin crawl. I picked up, hearing June's shaky voice whisper, "Please, someone help me." The line went dead, replaced by a chilling silence. Somewhere in the house, footsteps approached. Slow, heavy, and deliberate. "Mark," I said quietly to myself, feeling his presence like a shadow looming just beyond sight. I knew I had to be careful. This was a reenactment, a delicate dance between life and death, and one wrong move could trap me here forever. I followed the creaking stairs to the living room, where a dark figure stood by the window, the city lights casting harsh angles across his face. Suddenly, June appeared, fragile but determined. Her eyes met mine through the swirling fog of time. "You're here," she said softly, "to finish what I couldn't." I nodded, swallowing my fear. We moved through the night's fractured moments, piecing together the truth. Mark's violence, June's desperation, and the final desperate call she made to 911. The clock ticked down as sirens wailed faintly in the distance. June's ghost reached out, her translucent hand brushing mine. "Thank you," she whispered before fading, the house feeling lighter, as if a heavy weight had lifted. I collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but alive. The loop was broken. The next morning, police arrived. Drawn by a tip I didn't send. In the attic, they found June's journal, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The cold case was finally cracked, and for the first time in years, the house felt like a home again. The police were polite but tired, their faces lined with years of unsolved cases. I handed them June's journal, the fragile pages that had been the key to unlocking the mystery. Detective Ramirez flipped through it slowly, eyes narrowing. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "We've been chasing shadows on this one for a decade." As they packed up evidence, I walked the house one last time. The daisy was gone, replaced by a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen table. The air no longer felt heavy or watchful, but calm, almost warm. I could breathe again. I pulled out my camera and spoke softly. "This place. It's more than a haunted rental. It's a story of pain, of silence broken. June deserves to be remembered." Back home, I uploaded the footage. Unedited, raw. The loop, the ghost, the journal. It was all there. My subscriber count surged, but more important were the messages pouring in. People who had lost loved ones, others who'd experienced their own haunted nights. The story had touched something real. Months later, I received a letter from Detective Ramirez. The case was officially closed. Mark arrested posthumously through evidence found in the house, thanks to June's journal. The AirBNB was delisted. No more tourists chasing ghosts. Just a memorial plaque where the porch once sagged, honoring June Crawford. I sometimes wonder if I changed the course of her story, or if she guided me through it all. But one thing's certain. Some ghosts aren't here to scare us. They just want to be seen, and sometimes that's enough to set them free. The house stands quiet now, and so do I. I am back in the main university hall. I am safe. Everything is okay. I am not sure what just happened, except that I was saved from something terrible. I don't know who saved me and how, but somehow a bunch of pigeons were involved. I swear those pigeons helped me to safety. I draw in some deep breaths to calm myself. I haven't run so hard since I was in the 500m dash in high school. I am panting and sweat drips off my forehead and onto my laptop. Running that hard in the late morning heat and sun was no fun. But the cool air conditioning of the university hall is calming me further. As soon as I get these words out, I will go find my prof and the other students and pretend nothing has happened. I can't make a fuss now. I just need to put it down so I know what just happened really did happen. I swear it's not just the jet lag lulling me into having a midday nightmare. I saw those men, and I was saved from them. Okay, I will tell everything from the start. It is my first time in the US, and my first time presenting at a proper academic conference. Naturally, I was super excited, sending a constant stream of pictures to my proud family back home. My real home, not where I am studying in Canada as an international student. We arrived here 2 days ago from Canada, my prof, and the lucky few grad students funded to go on this important conference and present our initial findings. However, after a full day in the air-conditioned university halls of the conference, and another early morning round of furious networking, shaking hands and presentations and so many names, combined with the jet lag which seemed to be just hitting me, I felt the need to take a break, and decided to explore this warm sunny town on my own, at least just for a bit. I get on well enough with my fellow students, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it is a very competitive and even hostile environment as we all chase our prof's favor and limited funds and positions, and it's nice to get away from each other. It must have been around 10 a.m. that I left my companions on campus and started walking along the unfamiliar streets, taking in the varied and delightful sights and sounds. I knew, of course, how important the conference was and how privileged I was to be there. But really, I promised myself I would only be gone for 20 minutes, just a quick stroll to reset. About 5 minutes of walking, I became aware I was in a very different neighborhood than the elegant tree-lined campus I had just left. I went in a corner shop and bought a traditional style of local pastry, wanting to experience something other than the catered plastic conference food. In the shop, something about the way I was looked at, the downward avoidant sweep of the cashier's eyes, and the turn of the back of other customers made me feel quite conscious of my accent and skin color, although it wasn't anything I hadn't already experienced in Canada. Nothing I could put my finger on. I paid politely, went out and sat on a street-side bench to enjoy my snack before finding my way back to the campus and rejoining my group. I leaned back on the bench, stretched out my legs, and let the sun warm my face. It reminded me of my home country, in fact, although I had been here for only one full day, and most of that at the conference and the hotel. I felt more comfortable in this sun-soaked town than I ever had in the chilly Canadian city where I now went to grad school. There was a grassy patch before the bench, and a group of pigeons were pecking and bickering about. The scene calmed me, and forgetting about the weird vibes in the shop, I broke off some pastry, crumbled it, and scattered it before them. The pigeons pecked at crumbs hungrily, and then looked at me, expecting more. I took out my phone and tried to figure out where I was and my route back to campus, just to be on the safe side as I hadn't gone far and I was pretty sure I could find my way back. I saw with frustration I had lost my signal and an unfamiliar network appeared in the corner of my screen. I pulled up maps, but nothing seemed to happen. One of the pigeons hopped forward. I looked at it curiously and then, feeling something more was expected of me, broke off a larger piece of the pastry and offered it to the pigeon. The pigeon came closer, and at the same time my phone dinged with a text message from an unknown number. I glanced down at my screen. "You are a foreigner. They don't like strangers here. Go." I was so startled I dropped the pastry, which broke into pieces. The pigeons all rushed forward, and soon there was a small feathery gray sea of pigeons at my feet, surrounding the bench. "Ding, leave, now." I looked up. The street was suddenly very quiet and empty. The corner shop was closed. I looked one way and then the other. I saw two bulky man-like beasts walking up right down the street, coming straight towards me. I screwed up my eyes, trying to figure out what they were. Their heads looked odd, much too big for their bodies and not like human heads. As they stepped closer, I realized they were wearing masks, a reindeer and a pig. The reindeer's antlers reached up, pointing high towards the sky, and the sun shone on their animal faces. Hanging off the shoulder of the pig man was a length of coiled rope. My phone dinged again, but I didn't look at it. I got up and started running in the opposite direction. I knew the men broke into a run too. The pigeons also rose with a great flapping. I didn't know where I was going, just running to get away from the masked men. The pigeons swirled around me, opening up and forming a sort of path as I was running. Without realizing it at first, I was following the path of the pigeons. There were more pigeons than I ever knew existed in the world. All before me and around me were gray flapping wings, and yet not a single feather touched me. They just opened up a path through which I was running fast, hearing yells behind me, but not daring to stop. One instant I glanced back and saw the antlers rising above the sea of pigeon, the sun glinting on them, and I was prompted to run even faster. I felt I had been running with a mass of pigeons for hours, but it must have been barely 5 minutes that the pigeons dispersed. My vision cleared, and I realized I am at the floor of the great marble steps leading into the university main hall. I looked back and saw only a few backpacked students hunched over the phones. No sign of the masked men. A few pigeons dotted the steps. Slowly, panting and doubled over, I go up the steps and enter the hall. That place is where people go to die, the man said to me. I'd only asked him for directions. My 2 friends and I were planning on taking a little road trip during summer in between semesters of school. We only had a couple weeks of freedom, so we were going to take advantage of it. We'd always enjoyed sharing spooky stories and urban legends with each other. We were super fans of horror, especially if it had some truth behind it. So naturally, our ideal destination for this trip would be a haunted location within driving distance. When we were trying to decide where to go, Allison had made the first suggestion. Ooh, what about Redtail? It's only like a 3-hour drive away. And you guys already know the lore surrounding that place. I don't, Ethan interjected. What? How do you not? Allison snapped at him. About the Nazis. Carter, I know you have heard of it. I shrugged. I'm lost. Wow. Okay, well, Allison went on. You know how after World War II a bunch of Nazis fled to South America? Ethan and I nodded. Well, apparently some of them came to the States as well, and they couldn't just go to, like, some crowded town or city, so they built their own town. Redtail Flow is the full name, I think. Most of them were scientists or high-ranking military officials, and supposedly some experiment they were conducting killed most of them, but there are still some people living there today. She had piqued our curiosity, so she continued. Some say the place is now haunted by their spirits, and people have witnessed the ghosts of Nazis past, she said in an exaggerated voice while lifting her arms and twiddling her fingers for an added spooky effect. Long story short, we decided to go. The town was located at a pretty high elevation along the northern border of New Mexico. We had to cross state lines to get there, but that wasn't a big deal. There were no AirBNBs or major hotel chains within 50 miles of the place. We called around town trying to get through to anyone. A lot of the lines were dead or disconnected. Finally, someone answered and agreed to let us stay in his guest house for $20 per night, which was sufficiently affordable. We transferred 3 nights' worth of money to him in exchange for directions and instructions on how to get inside his place. The entire town wasn't listed on Google Maps or any other electronic GPS system, but Allison had an older paper map that would help us get there. We took my truck and headed to Redtail. After about 2 hours in, the paved road became foreign to my tires, as dirt and gravel was now our new medium. We stopped for gas maybe 45 minutes from our destination. The smallest gas station I'd ever seen. Taped on the gas pump was a piece of paper with crude handwriting that read, "Please pay inside." I walked into the shop, no bigger than my own bedroom, and was greeted by a wrinkled, leathery man. "How ya doing, kid? Gas, is it?" "Yes, sir." As he swiped my credit card, he asked, "So where ya headed to on this beautiful day?" "Me and my friends are going up to Redtail." "Isn't it right up this road, going north? A little over half an hour from here." He stiffened and grimaced simultaneously. My card was still in his hand, which was now shaking. "Now why the hell would you want to get yourself into there? That place is no good." "Yeah," I responded a little uneasily. "My friends and I are into that sort of, creepy history stuff, and with all the myths about the Nazis." "That place ain't some museum, kid." His eyes were wide and face was reddening. "That place was never home to no Nazis. That's all bullshit. Something evil lives there. It consumes a person's soul and spits it out all mangled like." I didn't know how to respond. He handed me my card back and left me with a final warning. He leaned toward me as if to emphasize his point. That place is where people go to die. I said nothing as I backed out of the doorway and advanced toward my car. I pumped my gas silently before getting back in the truck. After I drove off, I told Allison and Ethan what the man told me. "Wow," Ethan said, "an old man warning us about an old town we're going to. That's some cheesy 80s horror movie shit right there." We all laughed. "Honestly, that makes me more excited to go," Allison said as she grabbed my hand. We'd been dating for almost 2 years, but luckily Ethan never felt like a third wheel. We'd all been friends since elementary school, and Ethan never let me forget that Allison had a crush on him first in 3rd grade. That son of bitch. About 30 minutes later, we drove past a large green sign with white lettering that read, "City limits, red tail flow, population, unknown." Where I assumed there used to be a number, someone had graffitied the word unknown on top of it. "Red tail flow," Ethan repeated after reading the sign. "You know, it reads more like Native Americans named it, not a bunch of Germans." We laughed a little and I responded, "True, so either we are going to an almost abandoned Nazi town or an almost abandoned town built on an ancient burial ground. Either way, I like our odds of finding something creepy." "What does Flo even mean?" Ethan asked. "Probably the last name of someone who founded the town," Allison answered. "Ah, yes," I joked. "Mr. Flo. The most German name I've ever heard." As we approached the town, I felt as if we had stepped back in time to the Old West. Though we were basically on top of a mountain, it was not too cold, rather warm actually. Dirt and sand composed the roadways while tumbleweeds greeted us every half-mile. On the way to the town square, we had only seen 1 or 2 houses which looked more like abandoned shacks. The rest of the land lay empty. It was just how I imagined it would look like. Town Square was engraved on a large piece of stone that sat on the side of the roadway. The square was more of a strip, no longer than a quarter mile. On each side of the dirt road were a couple shops, a restaurant, a bar, and a drugstore. And well, that was about it. Some of the buildings looked abandoned despite having an open sign on the window. There were no people walking down the gravel sidewalks. There were no cars driving through or parked along the street. It looked sincerely abandoned. "All right, I'm already a little unsettled," I admitted. "Ally, how do I get to the house from here?" One sec." She pulled out the handwritten directions from the glove box that the man had given us over the phone. "Okay, once you enter town, yada yada, town square. All right, go past the drugstore and make the first left in half a mile on Hitchier Road. Then the driveway will be on our right in another half mile. The mailbox is red and says FS in white lettering." As we pulled away from town square, I noticed in my rear view that a few people were exiting some of the buildings we'd just passed. They walked out slowly and seemed to all congregated in the middle of the street. They were just staring in the direction of my car as I drove away. I didn't say anything to the Allison or Ethan because I didn't think much of it at the time. As we trekked on towards the house, we passed a couple of other driveways, though we couldn't see where any of them led. The road became narrower as if it was meant for only one lane of traffic. "Carter," Ethan cried out while grabbing my shoulder from the back seat, his other hand outstretched pointing towards the side of the road. "That's it. The red mailbox." Sure enough, there it was, bright red with FS painted on the side rather neatly. I turned the car and began scaling the long driveway, making my way through a couple bends and turns. When the house came into view, we realized it was really more of a cabin. It stood old and weathered. A small, wooden cottage with a couple of stairs leading up the front porch. "Who wants to bet this place has no electricity or running water?" Ethan remarked. "The guy on the phone said it did," Allison said with a touch of defeat in her voice. "We should check it out first before we bring our stuff in," I said. We crossed the mix of dirt and overgrown grass and ascended the stairs leading to the front door. Allison grabbed a key from under an empty flower pot that sat on the front porch, exactly where the man said it would be. She unlocked the door and we made our way in. It smelled like an ancient library. It was relatively dark inside. The only light seeping in came from the cracks in the closed blinds. We figured out the electricity worked after I pulled a string in the center of the living room, turning on a single light bulb. The living room was made up of a long, dining room-like table with 6 chairs to accompany it. They were all wooden, matching the interior and exterior of the structure. There was no kitchen, but there was a mini-fridge. The other 2 rooms were bedrooms, each with one mattress adorned with what seemed to be clean sheets. I opened all the blinds and let the late sun's light pour through the glass panes. "Hey, there's water too," Ethan called to us from the only bathroom, sounding surprised. "We're in the clear, gang." We grabbed our small amounts of luggage and settled into our bedrooms. The sun was setting, so we decided to stay in tonight and figured we'd head into town tomorrow morning. We had brought a couple of board games and a 24-pack of beer to help pass the time. "Come on, I've landed on boardwalk like 6 times, Ethan yelled at Allison. "Sorry, dude," she said, taking the beer bottle away from her lips. "Rules are rules. At least you're not in jail again." The Monopoly game was quickly growing heated. Along with it, we were quickly becoming intoxicated. "If I go bankrupt because of you, I swear." Thump, thump, thump. Ethan's empty threat was cut short by 3 heavy pounds on our front door. We all stared at it like we'd never heard someone knock on a door before. Thump, thump, thump. We all flinched a little bit. I'll get it," I said, rising from my chair. I walked over to the front door, almost tiptoeing for some reason. I unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door to peek outside. It was dark, very dark. I couldn't see anything, so I flipped a couple switches on the wall next to me until the outside light came on. Once illuminated, I could see there was nothing on the porch. I pulled the door open wider and poked my head out to look in all directions but saw nothing. I turned to Ethan and Allison, whose attention was already on me. I don't see anyone," I said. Allison stood up and approached the door with a puzzled look on her face. Her eyes were locked on something outside. She pointed. "There, someone is standing there." I squinted a little and looked out into the darkness. My heart sank a little once I saw what she did. Somebody was standing maybe 100 feet away from the porch, and it seemed like they were looking in our direction. "Hey," I shouted at the figure. "What are you doing?" The outline of the person neither moved, swayed, nor responded. Allison hastily shut the door. We stood in quiet panic for a moment. "Should we call the police?" she said. "I doubt this town even has a police station," Ethan said. I reached for the knob to open the door back up. Just a crack at first. I didn't see anyone, so I swung the door open yet again. Whatever was there was gone, and Allison saw that as well. "I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing," she said. "Maybe they had the wrong house and got embarrassed. I don't know, but the front door is going to be locked. The side door is boarded up completely, and all the windows can't be opened. We're safe. We'll be fine. You still have the key, right?" I asked Allison, who nodded in response. "Good. Okay," I said. "Let's just finish up this game tomorrow night. I think we've had enough to drink. We should probably hit the sack so we can get up early tomorrow." The others agreed. I could tell we were all a little on edge. We cleaned up our bottles and settled into our rooms, all the while sneaking glances outside to make sure no one was there. We didn't exactly have anything to protect ourselves with besides chairs and bottles we could throw at an intruder. Ethan said goodnight and headed into his room as Allison and I settled into our own. Once under the covers, we exchanged a few goodnights before we drifted off. When I got up the next morning, I noticed 3 things were missing: my keys, my truck, and Ethan. I did the math. Allison and I figured he might have just run into town to pick up breakfast for us. I thought it was strange, though. I've never let him borrow my car before, let alone take it without asking me first. We began to worry as hours passed. It was nearing 2 p.m., and we had awoken at 8 a.m. That means Ethan had my car out for over 6 hours. Something wasn't right. I suggested to Allison we take a walk into town to see if he's there. She agreed. We walked down the dusty road admiring the beauty of the place. Though it was the middle of nowhere, and though it was allegedly haunted grounds, it was quite picturesque. A scene straight out of Westworld. As we walked, we held hands, tossed sand at each other's feet playfully, and found the occasional rock to be kicked until it fell off the road. As we neared closer to the center of town, Allison pointed out a woman walking in our direction on the other side of the road. As the distance between us and the woman shrank, Allison spoke up to her. "Hey there," she said in a genuine, friendly tone. The woman wore dusty overalls that tucked into her boots. She looked like she had been working on a farm. She responded neither to Allison's greeting nor my wave that followed it. She did acknowledge us, though, in a way. She stared at us. She stared like she was seeing a ghost. Her eyes were wide. It didn't quite look like she was scared of us, however. No, not scared. More of a surprised expression. After we passed her, we walked in silence for a moment. "Carter," Allison whispered. She stopped walking. "She's staring at us." I almost become immobile from shock, but Allison's tug at my hand helped me keep my stride. I glanced over my shoulder, trying to be as nonchalant as possible. She was standing in the middle of the road, just glaring at us. I turned back to Allison. "Maybe they haven't seen an outsider in a while." "Yeah, maybe," she replied, unconvinced. "They act like they've never seen someone from outside their town." Once we made it to the town square, we stood in the middle of the road looking around at each of the buildings. We hadn't seen my truck or any sign of Ethan. It's impossible to leave town without passing through the square, so we were determined to find someone who had seen Ethan leave. The largest building in town was the diner. The large letters rooted into the front of the structure read, "Food 24/7. "Odd name for a restaurant," Allison said without taking her eyes off the sign. "No kidding. Creativity does not seem to be running rampant here," I said in a hushed tone as if someone were listening. We walked inside and were welcomed to an empty diner, similar to those you'd see in the 1950s. We hopped up on 2 bar stools and waited for someone to see us. A couple minutes passed, so I called back a hello to the open kitchen but got no response. And just then, a patron came through the door and sat down in a booth. He was looking at us. Allison and I shot each other a glance. "Hey there," she said to the man. "Did you happen to see a red truck come through this morning?" He didn't move or blink, he just looked at us. Another came into the diner. In fact, it was the same woman who we saw walking down the road. She kept her eyes on us as she took a seat, sharing the booth with the man. Then another person came in. Then another, and another. All of them had their eyes locked on us from the moment they entered the restaurant. They all quietly took their seats and continued to stare. Allison's delicate voice tried to ask the question again to the new patrons, though she was visibly scared. Have any of you seen a red truck?" No response. No movement. "Allison, I think we should leave," I said as I stood from my bar stool. The diner was almost full of people at that point. It was as if the sole reason any of them came in was because they knew we were there. They didn't have guns pointed at us. They didn't look angry. They didn't look like they wanted to hurt us. Even so, I felt a real sense of danger around them, like their stares would make me drop dead in an instant. They all just looked, stunned. Their eyes were wide and their mouth barely open. It created an unmatchable amount of dread within me, the truest sense of terror I've ever felt. We slowly walked out of the restaurant, and in an unspoken agreement, we began a light sprint to get out of there and back to the cabin. I don't know if Allison turned back to look, but I did. They were all in the street. They were all staring, and no one was moving. Allison and I were walking up the driveway to the cabin. My heavy breathing and rapid heartbeat were all I could focus on. Before Allison and I could even talk about what had happened, we noticed my truck sitting in the driveway, right where I had parked it before. "That son of a bitch. Where the hell did he go?" I said as I advanced towards the front porch. "He had to have gone the other way," Allison pointed out. "Otherwise, he would have passed us on his way back." We climbed the stairs and barged through the door. "Where the F did you go?" I said, getting straight to the point. "Excuse me," he said. "Where the F did you go? I have been sitting here forever waiting for you 2 asshats to come back." "What have you been smoking?" Allison intervened. "We left for town on foot because you never came back with the truck." Ethan looked truly surprised and then amused. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Crazy Pants. I get it now, you're pulling my leg. You almost got me. I didn't even hear the truck pull in, you two did a good job." He started to clap his hands together. I grabbed them mid-clap. "We aren't pulling your stupid leg, idiot. When we woke up, you were gone. The truck was gone. We waited for 6 hours and you never came back. We went to town, just now got back, and we find you and the truck are here again. What are we supposed to think of that?" Now his amused expression grew to one of alarm. I didn't take your car, dude. When I got up this morning, you two were still gone," he said. "Carter. When I woke up last night and talked to you, you said you were taking it out with Allison for a surprise. You never came back." "Wait, what?" Allison said. "No," I started. "No, I didn't wake up last night. I most certainly didn't have that conversation with you. Yes, you did. It was dark, but I know it was you. It was sometime in the middle of the night. I heard a thud or something, so I came out of my room and you were standing in the doorway with the keys. My eyebrow slowly rose in confusion, but he continued. You said you had a surprise for Allison, that you saw a nice place on the way into town to park the truck and look at stars. I asked if you were good to drive and you said you sobered up enough. Ring any bells? Allison looked at me, then back at Ethan. We didn't go look at stars, and I would have woken up if you left the bed. And I would have woken up if you left, I directed the comment at Allison. We all looked at each other in suspicion, in bewilderment, in panic. Momentarily, I felt as if I was in the room with two strangers, and I'm sure they felt the same way. After our three-way standoff had subsided somewhat, we took our seats around the Monopoly board we had no intention of playing. We sat without speaking for a little while, passing and catching glimpses at one another. Our minds were reeling. The silence was broken when I told them what had been on my mind all day. I don't think I locked the door last night. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you'd like to support us, do hit that subscribe button and like this video. This really helps with our channel growth. So, see you tomorrow at the same time.